Ladies and gentlemen, the fantasy three pieces in your earbuds tonight. Nate Markham, Drew Scott, Rhett Manuel, Fourth and Frames. Week 8, injuries everywhere, chaos everywhere, fantasy teams in shambles, but we're in good shape. And tonight, we're going to talk about Week 8 smash, pass, and stash players. Boys, let's get it popping.
This should be played at high volume, preferably in a residential area.
Guys, thank you so much for dropping in with us tonight. Y'all know the deal. We are Fourth and Frames. We are on the Fantasy and Frames Family Network podcast channel, whatever you want to call it. And speaking of the podcast channel, of the YouTube channel, do not forget to like, subscribe, review to catch anytime someone from our Fourth and Frames family and our Fantasy and Frames family drops something new. Don't forget to lock in with us at fantasyandframes.com for all the latest in the rankings, articles, takes, news and notes, hot or not, see who's the coolest around. It doesn't really matter. Like, we're here to give you the latest and greatest on the info. But fellas, Drew, you took a little hiatus last week, spent some time with the kids. How the heck are you, buddy?
Yeah, I'm doing great, man. The kids, it's games after games after games. They keep us busy, but I wouldn't trade it for nothing. But I'm happy to be back with you guys this week. I'm a little sad though. You know, whenever you think about the fact that week 8 is upon us in most fantasy leagues, and week 17 we're basically approaching the halfway mark where our fantasy seasons are almost halfway over. And it's like, man, we wait all this time for it to get here, and like I feel like the season just started. Now the fantasy season's almost halfway done, so it's a sad week, man.
Yeah, it is a sad week, but it can't be all sad whenever you're doing as terribly as I am this year. And for all our listeners out here tonight, Albert, thank you for joining in with us as you always do. Nate Markham,
yo,
the Chiefs are still undefeated. Yours is dashing as always.
Thank you.
Your banter is unmatched,
but
your Chiefs are unbeaten. So, how does it feel to have far and away the best favorite team among this show?
The bar was extremely low. Regardless, I'm still very thrilled and happy, and I'm very disappointed that I had a tag under my name or under my face down here that said KC, and I didn't change it, and I'm scrambling, so I'm not going to mess with it. It's supposed to have continued on to now say, 6-0, but we all know where they're at, and maybe
we know they're the only undefeated team. We get it.
Blah, blah.
Minnesota's rough. But whatever. I will say, little note, I was researching when you said a nice little 3-piece for everybody. I was like, you know what? What's some good, like, the Three Amigos, the Three Stooges. So I typed in the wrong thing, most popular threesomes, and the Google review was not quite exactly what I was thinking. So needless to say, I got
great.
I didn't quite get that for everybody else.
Yeah. Shout out the FCC for not getting us fined tonight. We appreciate you, fellas. So let's get into some news and notes. And of course, because the rich get richer and Nate Markham is who he is, little news breaks this morning where the Chiefs are reportedly still close to acquiring DeAndre Hopkins. We're all assuming that that's pretty close to being done at this point. But I'm going to go ahead and start with you, Nate, and just ask you in terms of the Kansas City Chiefs, in terms of Patrick Mahomes, in terms of DeAndre Hopkins, what changes fantasy-wise with this deal?
The floor for DeAndre Hopkins actually is stable. It's not made of particle board anymore. I think the floor for Travis Kelce is reduced is a little, I don't want to say a lot because it's still Travis Kelce, but it does have me more concerned. Juju, now with the hamstring injury and the involvement of D-Hop now, is probably gone. And I want to think it probably moves Mahomes from like QB 15 or 14 rest of the season, maybe 13. it might move a spot.
No.
That's about it. I really don't think it moves much from him. But I think what it does is it makes DeAndre Hopkins a person who, on most of our teams, you had to really struggle to put him in that wide receiver 3 spot, knowing full well that it was Will Levis, Mason Rudolph, and the injuries aside. It just, do you still feel great about it? I don't know. But I think that there's that, growing optimism in all of us that he's on the field with Mahomes.
Yeah.
So Drew,
for Mahomes, I think that, in 6-point per passing touchdown leagues, I think it makes Mahomes a little bit more exciting just because with how good of a red zone threat Hopkins is and how sure-handed he is, it could raise the level of passing touchdowns he gets. But for me, if there's anybody in my league that is now excited about Mahomes and kind of overreacting to this news, I'm trying to use this as a moment to try to sell him personally if I have Mahomes. But yeah, I agree. I think Hopkins is a little bit safer. And I'm really interested to see what happens with Xavier Worthy specifically, because this past week they really made an effort to get him more involved. His first read target share was up. There were a couple of deep shots to Worthy that really missed. But now that, between Kelsey and Hopkins, there's going to be so much attention to that short and intermediate part of the field that you have to think those deep shots are going to start connecting a little bit more. And we see it all the time with rookie receivers coming on, in the second half of their rookie seasons. And so that's really the intriguing part to me, is I want to keep an eye on Xavier Worthy and see what happens with him.
Yeah, I agree with that for sure. And our boss, who's on the Fantasy and Frames chat, says that the KC Chiefs are the 2017 All-Star team with Hunt, D-Hop, Mahomes, and Juju Smith-Schuster. And he's over here owning up to it, saying, hey, that last one was me. Guys, we wouldn't go out there and be trashing all these guys. They've been viable fantasy assets so far this year. Kareem Hunt, Juju Smith-Schuster. Maybe not Patrick Mahomes, but hey, that's fine. Our friend JTube has a question for us. Should we drop Geno Smith for Sam Darnold? I'm going to go ahead and say I wouldn't do that, in my opinion. Geno Smith has been the quarterback 6 in fantasy football so far this season, averaging about 21 fantasy points per game. Yes, I know we have the DK Metcalf week-to-week injury concern right now, but all that does for me is open up the door for somebody like Jackson Smith and Jigba, who has had some big games this year. Tyler Lockett always seems to be on the pitch count, always seems to be productive whenever he has that opportunity. So for me, I'm just going to go ahead and say keep Geno Smith. What do you guys think?
I think it depends on if you're streaming the position, you're just talking about for this week, or if you're taking more of a season-long approach, because I think Geno has the easier matchup this week against Buffalo compared to the Rams have been pretty tough against fantasy quarterbacks, the last 5 or 6 weeks. But Darnold has the much easier schedule for the rest of the year. So for me, it just depends on, is this more of a short-sighted thing or a long-sighted thing? If you're thinking more like rest of season, who are you going to feel more comfortable plugging in for the rest of the year? I think the answer might be Darnold, but I don't think a huge win or loss either way. Honestly, I'd like if I was doing rest of season rankings, Darnold and Geno would be pretty close, but that would be the strength of schedule the rest of the way. If you're looking at it from a long-term perspective, would be the tiebreaker for me, and I would probably go Darnold.
The trend, if you're looking at just moving forward, like you said, is that Minnesota's bound to gain TJ Hawkinson back. I think the likelihood that they incorporate a heavier pass volume going forward is greater than what Seattle will do. I don't know what Ryan Grubbs will do without D-Hop. And you mentioned, Red, is that JSN has had I think you said weeks, plural, might be a stretch, maybe a week. But at the same time, we want to have, again, that optimism in us. Does he revert without DK maybe to a more run-heavy scheme? We saw Kenneth Walker be able to dominate games. I guess I would lean on one other question that maybe, is there rumors that, this whole Matthew Stafford to Minnesota crap, I think is just made up from one person. I don't believe that, just for the record. Yes. But if you are in the belief, that JTube, you really think that there's smoke, even though it's manufactured smoke, that there's fire, then no. But I don't mind moving for Darnold, just like you mentioned, kind of going forward. Very long-winded for us to say 2-1 that I would probably pick up Darnold.
2-1, I lose. Okay.
2-1, you don't lose. I think everybody loses.
All right. So he also asked, would we drop either Wandale or Juwan Jennings for DeAndre Hopkins?
Man.
That's tough.
I know it really. It's a full point PPR. I would have to assume. If it was a half point, I would drop Wandale.
Yep, I agree.
If it's full point, but that's another thing too. Juwan Jennings, the hip pointer. That's I don't think that Debo's going to be out this week. I think he'll be back, is what it sounds like.
I
And
agree.
Ammonia,
Yeah, I think he'll play
there. And then who knows? They run enough 2 wide receiver sets, not 3 wide receiver sets, that maybe Ricky Pearsall does get on the field. So I would, I say, yeah, I could drop either one of those 2 for D-Hop, whichever direction in the scoring you have.
Yep, yeah. If you're in a half-point PPR league, I think you drop Wandale. If you're in full point, I think you drop Juwan Jennings for him.
All right. Mark asks, should he drop Jaylen Warren for Devin Singletary?
No. Those guys are trending in complete opposite directions. Singletary's losing touches to Tyrone Tracy, and Jaylen Warren split snaps 50% with Najee for the first time all year this past week. So, no, if I were you, I would keep Warren and leave Singletary out there for somebody else.
And he also wants to ask, J2B's 3 and 4, who is someone who is good and consistent to trade for in a flex spot?
Any of the Philadelphia Eagles right now, pass catchers are in a great spot. If you look like the next, I think they get Washington twice. They get, oh man, I had the schedule in front of me earlier. They have a really good schedule, and Smith. And we've heard this. I've heard 3 or 4 different reports today and yesterday about Devontae Smith being a great option to trade for, not pick up, but you know what I'm saying. So it's not just an independent, my own thought. I have read other places as well, and that's one. What do you got, Brett? Who you?
I mean, in this moment right now, if I have to say someone who is going to be looking for that we are going to trade for in a flex spot, I mean, for me, and I'm just going to go ahead and pull up rankings real quick so that way I have it on spot.
Smart.
Because I'm never really good at coming off the top of the cuff with this. Sorry, guys. I know it feels like I'm an expert, but in all actuality, I'm a normal dude just like you guys at the end of the day.
Well, while you're doing that, I'll throw out a couple names. I think I'm sure the Waddle owner's probably aware that Tua's coming back, but if you can still get Waddle even for a decent price, I think he's a good pick. And then you said flex play, so I'm trying to think a little bit deeper. Darnell Mooney's been pretty consistent. I think he might be a good guy we're trading for. Consistent isn't the word I would use for Xavier Worthy, but I think he could be an interesting trade target right now. If you agree at all with what I said about the offense, probably possibly opening up with Hopkins being there as well as already having Kelsey underneath. I think Jonathan Brooks will be a consistent guy once he comes back, and he has yet to even see the field yet. So maybe that manager is tilting because we were expecting him to be back and he hasn't made his return yet. And Chuba Hubbard has played pretty well to start the year. So I mean, those are a few names that come to mind for me. And
I'll give us one real quick.
Okay.
If you can go ahead and get him, I'd try to acquire Tank Bigsby right now. You look at the rest of the schedule. There is a 3-game stretch with Minnesota, Detroit, and Houston between weeks 10 and 13 that might be a little bit hairy. But I mean, if you're looking at the next couple of weeks, there's Green Bay, there's Philadelphia. In week 14, right around playoff time, you have Tennessee. I mean, you have Vegas late in the season. And with the way that his snaps have trended and the way Travis Etienne has not been good this season, I mean, I think Tank Bigsby is probably a solid guy to look at right now as well.
I like it.
I do too.
All right. So a couple more things. We have Jonathan Lee, 12-man, 1 full PPR, 2 and 5. Just broke a streak. Hurts, H.N. Gibbs, AJB, Amari Cooper, Chase Brown, Younghoe Koo, Broncos, Worthy, Jennings, Hunter, Pearsall, Tolbert, Wright. Should he sit on this team or make some trades?
So, I mean, Hurts, like I said earlier, love going forward with his schedule against friendly teams. H-Hand's in the best spot possible. Any of the Dolphins are, of course, going forward. I mean, if you're going to be a miserable Dolphins fan, you might as well have H-Hand and Tua and everybody part of it. That goes out to some people in the chat as well. Just a little dig. Jahmyr Gibbs, obviously, coming off the RB1 overall last week. A.J. Brown with Hurts is fantastic. Amari Cooper's in a much better spot with Josh Allen. I mean, guys, it feels like we're just naming 5 or 6 players that are all on the up and up that I could see this team legitimately rattling off, what they say. win 2 in a row. That's called a winning streak, as they said on Major League. And I think that's about where it's going to be. I don't see a terrible weakness. Do you?
No, I think his team is full of like guys that were either buy high or buy low players. Like Hurts and AJ Brown, I think are guys you're wanting to buy. AJ Brown obviously would be much more difficult. Achan would be a guy I would consider a buy low right now. Gibbs is a guy I wouldn't want to sell. So yeah, no, I think that I think you have a team that had some bad breaks early on in the year, but I think you're set up for success down the stretch. So I'm never against trying to make some moves. I think of those players, I might try to sell high on Amari Cooper. Not to say that I don't think he's going to be good. I think he's going to be fine. But I think just the fact that Amari immediately came in and scored a touchdown, maybe you can take Amari and package him with somebody on your bench and really level up at the position, get an upgrade at wide receiver for a guy, rest of season that could end up being better if you want to make a move. But I think you just have a team that had some tough breaks at the start of the year, and I think that team is built to go on a run down the stretch. So I don't think you have to make a move.
Yeah, I think that team's going to come good as well. Real quick, we're just going to post this comment and not spend too much time acknowledging it. Dynasty Deviant, you'll be blocked going forward. Thanks for your time. And so J2, full of questions tonight. Appreciate the participation, guys. Instead of trading for BTJ and Devontae, who would you give? My wide receivers are Worthy, Marvin Harrison Jr., George Pickens, Puka, Jaden Reed, Wandale Robinson, Jawan Jennings. Running backs are Bucky, A-Chain, Brooks, and Bijan. Tight ends are Bowers and McBride. Once again, another team that feels pretty good right now, guys.
Yes. And he's 3-4, unless this is a different team. But I mean, don't get me wrong. I just said earlier, trading for Devonta is a great move. I really like that. But maybe of those names, it's hard. Like, who would you sell high on to buy low if you're considering Devonta a buy low, just coming off of a rough couple weeks? I mean, I'm not touching about. I'm not. So maybe if you can't start 2 tight ends, maybe. I mean, McBride's value is so low, but yet his rest of season projection so high but I don't want to trade Bowers. I don't. No. I mean, that just hurts.
Yeah, that's the issue. Is like your couple of your best trade pieces are tight ends, but Bowers, I think Bowers is the tight end one rest of season. I don't want to move him. And McBride, if you sell him, you're probably selling low right now. And so I don't think now is the time to sell with McBride. So I think with the team you got, you're probably going to have to, I would wait for a spike week from McBride and try to package him with like Pickens, or if Marvin Harrison Jr. has another, no, I don't really know if I want to trade. We'll talk about him a little bit later. I don't know if I want to trade Marvin Harrison Jr. either. I
mean, Wandale. If you could actually use Wandale as a trade piece to support to a person who, is like as a throw-in piece, and you could get BTJ or Devontae Smith back in return, I would be all in favor of that.
Yeah. If this team that you're looking to trade with, if they're struggling at tight end, if you can package McBride with one of those guys to go get BTJ or Devontae, I agree. I would like that.
All right, quick. Let's go ahead and answer John McGlynn's question. Could Chris Olave be pried away from an angry owner? Possibly. Yes or no?
I think he could.
Yeah.
I guess it all just depends on who you're going after. Man, that Saints offense looks rough. I know I'm not telling you anything you don't know, Rhett, but
God,
there's no lower. You're selling low.
Can I give you guys a good story as to how low the Saints offense is last week? So I'm on DraftKings pregame and I'm looking at all the props. And so, long story short, I was so let down by the Saints offense and just wrapped up in Bub Means euphoria that I put $16 total on Bub Means prop bets and won back 0 of it. So, hey guys, that's where we are right now. So Saints offense, not great, Bob.
Not great.
Not great.
Sorry about that.
That's
fine. A rough one, buddy.
Yeah.
Well, Derek Carr should be back soon. Olave's value is going up. The overall value of the rest of the team, no Rashid Shaheed, but Alvin Kamara's got 2 good hands. Just, one of them's broken or was broken or whatever that report was. It's a lot of bad reports coming out of New Orleans. We're hoping for some. positivity.
Nothing's positive right now. Speaking of people we can't be positive about right now, Jorge's asking, are you trying to move ETN in Dynasty? And for what kind of draft pick compensation?
I'm not trying to move him. I mean, his value is the lowest it's been since the Urban Meyer days. So it just for me now doesn't feel like the right time to try to move him. Maybe if he gets healthy and has a few good weeks, and you can do ETN plus like a third and get a first in a one quarterback league, or get an early second from somebody that's projected to be struggling in a super flex league. Maybe you do something like that. But as far as draft picks goes, right now I don't think you're going to get the draft pick that you want, and I think I would rather just keep him on our roster and see if I can wait for better days as opposed to selling him where his value is right now personally.
Unless you want to go and overpay for him to a specific owner in maybe one of your dynasty leagues. I mean, I would overpay personally. I'd probably give up 2 firsts and others, but I mean, do what you want, Jorge. What do I, I mean, but yeah, offers are always open from ETN managers, or owners, I would assume. Can't speak for everybody.
Yeah. Charlene Erickson, weekly watcher and listener, we appreciate you. She's asking if we should drop Dalton Kincaid for K. Dotton or Tucker Kraft. I think that's yes, big yes right now. I have Trey McBride as my starter. Just thinking ahead for a bye week, or pick up a running back or wide receiver for Kincaid. Right now with that Bucks wide receiver room situation, you're not going to find a better time to pick up K. Dotton. Even with Chris Godwin playing to the very end of that game last week and Mike Evans playing a significant amount of snaps, K. Dotton ended the game with 8 catches for 100 yards, which was his best game of the season. Now we have both these injuries that are coming into play. It's safe to assume that with the rapport with Baker Mayfield that he is going to be the guy, presumably in that passing game, while they solve the wide receiver situation. So at least for this week, I'd say K. Dotton is a slam dunk play. And what do you guys feel about it?
Well, I will definitely talk about K. Dotton in a little bit, and I will back 100% of what you said. And it really makes my compelling, some of our starts and our smash and passes easier.
Let's add some more
not
context
much more.
real quick, though. There's also Jalen McMillan, Juwan Jennings, Alexander Madison, Javonte Williams, Tyrone Tracy on the waiver wire, and there's only 4 bench spots in this league, and no one really trades because there's always guys on the waiver wire. So, as far as tight ends go specifically, I still prefer Tucker Kraft over K. Dotton rest of season. If you're talking about like a season long thing, if it's a 1 week plug and play, I don't remember when Arizona's bye week is, when you would have to worry about that. So if you're just worried about a 1 week plug and play, I'm not sure. But would you guys drop Kincaid for Javonte or Jalen McMillan or any of those guys?
The answer to your first question, so their bye week is week 11. And
okay,
if you,
so you still got a little bit.
The K. Dotton has the same bye week. So that doesn't,
oh, there you go.
That issue.
So Tucker, that makes the Tucker Kraft tiebreaker pretty easy there then.
If you want matchups, technically Dalton Kincaid gets the Chiefs, who have been pretty generous to tight ends. Obviously, that's based off of a 2-game sample more than anything else. If you peel, some of the layers apart. Who was the other person? Tucker Kraft. So Green Bay.
Kraft, yeah.
They play. This is good for radio or television or anything as I scroll through, and I probably already passed him. But I think the answer is Tucker Kraft. Doesn't matter. As long as he's not on a bye, and he's not, they play Chicago.
They play Chicago, and Chicago's been a pretty good matchup for fantasy tight ends this year. So, I think
shut down receivers for sure.
Right. Yeah. So I think the answer is Kraft over Otten if you're prioritizing the bye week. But before we do that, week 11, who does Buffalo have week 11?
Week 11?
Oh, Kansas City. You already said that.
Yeah.
Who has to your point, they have given up they have been the best matchup for fantasy tight ends based on schedule adjusted fantasy points given up to the position. So you might be better off just riding with Kincaid and playing him in week 11 whenever McBride goes on by, honestly. And I think it's like, if you're just talking about rest of season preferences, I think that Kincaid is in that ballpark with Tucker Kraft anyway. Like, I think it's kind of a lateral move. As far as which one you prefer, and it's, at least with the data we know right now, it looks like Kincaid has an easier matchup in week 11. So I might honestly stick with Kincaid unless you want to drop him for I don't know. I mean, Rhett, I know that you like Javonte, not to bury the lead too much. Would you drop having Trey McBride? Would you drop Kincaid for Javonte if you need some running back help?
And she's also threw this in there. So if you're dropping tight end for tight end, would you drop Christian Kirk for any of these guys on the wire as well? Oh, Christian Kirk's a mess right now. God, he's
such a mess.
No, I wouldn't pick up Christian Kirk off the wire right now if those are your other options.
Yeah, I don't.
That's the quick and dirty answer for me. But as for what we have right now, dropping one of those guys for Javonte Williams. I think Javonte Williams.
I would drop. I would just say this. I would drop Christian Kirk for Javonte.
Yeah. So, yeah, I think Javonte is above Christian Kirk right now for sure. And then lastly, before we get into our segment, John McGlynn said he just made a trade 12-team Dynasty Superflex for PPR. Which side do we prefer? Brooks will get Devin Singletary for Bucky Irving and a playoff 2025 first-round pick.
Brooks side pretty easily for me.
Yeah, I think I agree.
Yeah, I think I really want to. I'm trying to think of the future when it's not going to be the rest of the season. And, I worry about Jonathan Brooks rest of the season for the shares that I have just because it's like, why throw him out and get banged up? But I love him going forward. So I'm with you guys too. Proceed.
And also, I know Bernsey was talking some shit, but shout out to you, man. Love you to death.
Yeah, love you, bud. All right, speaking of sponsors that we love, let's talk about Underdog, formerly known as Underdog Fantasy, who, as we've been telling you on a weekly basis, is offering you, the player, free money if you use the promo code FRAMES. That is a 100% deposit up to $1,000. So don't miss out on all the fun and all the action over on Underdog today. So, guys, appreciate listeners once again with all these questions. We are going to get into our smash, pass, and stash players. Keep in mind that a smash player is a player that's outside the top 20 wide receivers, top 15 running backs, top 8 tight ends, or top 12 quarterbacks that we love this week. A pass is a player that is inside the top 35 wide receivers, top 20 running backs, top 12 tight ends, and top 20 quarterbacks that we think is going to sit below expectations. And a stash is a player that we like that is rostered in under 50% of sleeper leagues. So, Nate Markham, you tease the good people with your lead for the your first Smash Player of the Week. Go ahead and give us who your guy is, man.
Well, you know what? I kind of teased that a little bit, but I have another one. I want to save that one just a smidge because I want to start off with it. Since we didn't have a chance to really get too deep into the weeds with the news, obviously some of the news is that there's a certain quarterback in Miami that's going to make his appearance this week, and a rising tide lifts all ships type approach is that Tua Tagovailoa is going to hopefully return this week against the Arizona Cardinals. Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, every other player on the offense from Devon Achane to Raheem Mostert, etc., should be the biggest beneficiary. Now, that being said, am I a little remotely concerned from, I don't want to say shaking off the cobwebs because that connotates something negative, and I'm not trying to be negative towards him coming back. I worry about him, but on the field, man, there's no denying that offense is much more dynamic than when it's, the other pieces of garbage that we've had there. But look at Arizona. Arizona, the fifth most allowed passing yards. Thanks, Nate. They're tied for the 8th most touchdowns allowed. On the positive for Tua, we need him to stay upright, avoid pressure. We don't want any type of concerns where he's scared to take a hit. I don't think he's going to be running the ball, so his rushing upside is limited to nothing. But Dennis Gardeck, one of the pass rushers for the Arizona Cardinals, is out. Sean Murphy-Bunting, one of the corners slot, is out. 2 big pieces for an already porous defense. So I trust he'll stay upright. I think that when you're looking at a team that can't get pressures, they're 24th in sacks. He has attacked teams that are weak. I mean, he's attacked teams that are great too. They allow the 5th highest QB rating, 5th highest adjusted completion percentage. We saw Tyreek say, "Get me the ball. If you're in fantasy, play me this week. I'm ready to go. Start me. Yes, start me." And I mean, I've been starting you every week, Tyreek, and so trust me, this is a confidence booster. And so I feel like
Yeah.
I know there's no bye week, so this isn't a bye week replacement for quarterback, but there's plenty of bad options out there where you can shoot for the moon with Tua.
Yeah, and I like that call because I was going to piggyback off of you and use this smash play for later, but I'm just going to go ahead and get into it right now because I'm going to talk about Jalen Waddle against Arizona because, like we said, has it been awful? Yes. Has the quarterback been play awful? Yes. Is Tua back? Yes. So are we due for a bounce back with Jalen Waddle? An absolute yes, because the Arizona Cardinals have been 24th against wide receivers in fantasy points this season. The Jalen Waddle issue has been a quarterback issue if you dig into those numbers. While Tua has been out, Miami has run the ball a lot more. Jalen Waddle, famed deep threat, very fast guy, is only averaging 1.67 yards per route run and only has one deep target all season long, despite playing the same amount of snaps, whether Tua has been in there or out of there. I was looking at the fantasy points data suite tonight, and Miami this season, with Tua missing this significant chunk of time, they've been 29th in total team routes, 19th in team ADOT, 29th in team air yards, 30th total in team receptions for the season. They need Tua back. He's back, so it's got to happen this week. And I just want to take a look and compare to week 1 when Tua was fully healthy and this offense had all their pieces. In week 1, they ran 159 routes as a team. That was 12th. They had 34 targets. That was 6th. They had 338 team receiving yards, and they were at 2.17 yards per route run. So with Tua in the lineup, this is going to look like a very different Miami Dolphins offense. So on top of that, I just need some fun back in my life for the Miami Dolphins because they have been terrible to watch over the past few weeks. No offense, Bernsey, you would agree with me in this situation. So I'm tired of a boring Miami Dolphins team. I need that Jalen Waddle breakout to start getting some of that ADP back. It just feels like a good spot for that to happen this week against the Arizona Cardinals.
Yep. Yeah, I'm just so damn happy that Tua is back, man. Because I've got Waddle in a lot of places. I got a Tyreek a little bit, and it has been a brutal few weeks. And so, yeah, I'm also very excited for both of those guys for sure.
So, yeah, Drew, we've each gone through. We went through the Miami Dolphins run of smash players. Go ahead and give us your first smash player for the week, buddy.
My smash player is Tyreek Hill. Oh, I'm just playing. So I'm going to go to a different game, and it's Romeo Doubs against Jacksonville. I know that the Jaden Reed and Dontavian Wicks, those are guys are more exciting. You know, we like those guys. I like those guys, but ever since Dobbs was suspended in week 5, he's been awesome the last couple weeks. I know it might be hard to believe, but Dobbs has been the wide receiver 9 in full PPR fantasy points per game over those last 2 weeks, and he's got another plus matchup in front of him here in week 8. The Packers play the Jags this week, who have been the easiest matchup for fantasy receivers based on schedule-adjusted fantasy points given up to the position by a pretty wide margin. Like, they are comfortably the easiest option for fantasy receivers. And it's not just that. They also give up the 7th highest percentage of fantasy points to receivers that line up out wide, which is where the last 2 weeks Dobbs lined up over 80% of his snaps out wide. And just historically, he's been, a guy that lines up out wide. And during that same 2-week sample, Dobbs has led all Packers pass catchers in route percentage, target share, first read percentage, and he's second only behind Dontavian Wicks in yards per route run. So, I think that with Dobbs damn near always being on the field, Jordan Love continuing to look his way, and with the plus matchup, especially where Dobbs is lining up for the majority of his snaps, he's a smash play for me this week. Fantasy Pros week 8, expert consensus rankings has him down at wide receiver 31, but I've got him up at wide receiver 25.
Yeah, Romeo Doubs, not to mention over the past couple of weeks, like this Green Bay offense has been a little bit tough to predict in terms of the passing game, but it just seems like since that one game suspension that Doubs has, he just seemed like he's come out and been a little bit of a different player on tape. So, I like to call for this week as well on that. So Drew, I'm just going to go ahead and come back to you. Let's knock these out back to back because
okay.
you are a man of convictions. Man. You are a man of hills. You're a man of real estate, and you're going to die behind those hills and those real estate. So talk to us, man, because no one has been more faithful. No one deserves to love this man more than you do. So go ahead and talk to us about Kyle Pitts against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
Yeah, I was a little worried at the start of the year. They had me in the first half. I'm not gonna lie, but Kyle Pitts' season is so back. We are more back than we've ever been. Over the last 3 weeks, he's been the tight end 8 in PPR fantasy points per game, and he's only 0.4 points short from being the tight end 6 during that span. So I mean, he's right there, fringe top 5 tight end over the last 3 weeks. And I mean, Drake London, he's still the guy in this Falcons passing offense. Like, he has been incredible. But Pitts is finally starting to get more involved, and he's looked like the Kyle Pitts that I was hoping for coming into the season. Among tight ends that have run at least 40 routes over the last 3 weeks, he's second in receiving yards per game. He's 8th in yards per route run. And he gets to play the Tampa Bay Bucks. They're the 5th best matchup for fantasy tight ends over the last 5 weeks. And it also just happens to be the team who he has had the most fantasy points against this season whenever the Falcons and Bucks last played in week 5. So it was a success in week 5. I'm running it back again this week. The week 8 Fantasy Pros ECR has Pitts as the tight end 9. I've got him slightly ahead of that as the tight end 6, but I think you can be confident in starting him. I think he's a smash play this week, and I'm happy that Kyle Pitts' season is here.
Kyle Pitts' season has never left in your heart, though, man. That's what
absolutely
we do.
Not. No, absolutely not.
And maybe the best Kyle Pitts season was the friends we made along the way. Bad joke, but let's get into Wade Reed's question where he's asking which two should he play this week between Cooper Kupp, Josh Jacobs, and J.K. Dobbins. Drew.
Ooh, man. Let me see. Let me pull up my stuff here. Say Cooper Kupp, Dobbins, and Jacobs. So
Yeah.
Kupp, you got Kupp on Thursday Night Football against Minnesota. I'm playing him. Minnesota has been such a great matchup for fantasy receivers this year, and so that leaves Jacobs and Dobbins to choose between for the second piece. And I think Dobbins has the better matchup against New Orleans, but
Yes,
Jacksonville also isn't a bad matchup. And I think that Jacobs has looked better. Like Dobbins, the first couple weeks of the year, Dobbins was looking really good, but his play has started to decline the last few weeks. And so I think I would probably lean Kupp and Jacobs if it was me. But it's between Jacobs and Dobbins. It's tough.
Yeah, I have a hard time not playing Kupp as well. I know the first instinct for me is to give Cooper Kupp 1 week to get acclimated, but he's not the type. It's not the situation where I think it's an acclimation process, because I don't expect him to go out and have 150 yards of yak and anything chaotic and crazy. I expect it to be a good target volume and actually be able to do a lot of the short to intermediate against, Minnesota's extremely difficult. Minnesota's a really, really tough matchup, but it is Minnesota, right?
It is Minnesota. Yeah.
Okay. That's what I was.
But for fantasy receivers, specifically, they've been pretty vulnerable.
Yeah.
The defense as a whole is pretty good, but where Kupp thrives, they've been pretty vulnerable.
Right. I'll probably lean Jacobs. I just feel like Jacksonville is. I don't know, I feel like they're lacking more in the middle. My God, at the same time I say that, they're getting healthy across the linebackers. Devin Lloyd's coming back now. And New Orleans is Demario Davis, how banged up is he, Rhett? You probably have more insight on that than I do. I know he has been hurt at times. Is he back?
Yeah, he's played the last couple of weeks. Being said, he's also a 35-year-old linebacker on a defense that is mostly old. So, I mean, it hasn't been great all along. So what I'm going to say is I would agree with the Cooper Kupp situation, if for nothing else, for Cooper Kupp to get a lot of targets and audition for Russell Wilson and the Pittsburgh Steelers. Sorry, Drew. Had to get that shot in.
That's okay. That's okay.
But, yeah, I would also agree with starting Jacobs this week as well. So getting into our second smash, getting back to our smash players, Nate, you teased it. We talked about it briefly in the open.
Stop teasing me, Nate. Give it to me already.
Give me the good stuff, bud. Give me the goods from the woods.
Anytime it's that easy to give up, it's never worth it in the long run. It's one of those scenarios.
Oh my!
I know we went from the threesome talk to this teasing of Kate Otten. It's not much of a tease. We've seen over the last couple weeks now the progression to what, if you looked at the end of last season, that was one of the areas that I was motivated to get K-Dot on some teams, is that in the really important games of the season, playoffs included, of course, they leaned on K-Dot. And I think that while the season started off a little slow for him, a lot slow considering he was the tight end, 45 and somehow 116 because he had negative points in week 2. But since then, he's rattled off 5 straight top 24 finishes, 3 of which have been tight end 1 finishes. Last week, he was a tight end 4 overall. And if you look at the landscape of tight ends, there's only 3 of them that have had, 5 straight weeks where they've been a tight end 24 or better. And the 5 straight weeks, take that with a grain of salt. Let's put it this way. Very few tight ends have been as consistent as K-Dot. Outside of George Kittle, outside of Brock Bowers, and shockingly Cole Kmet, who, with the bye last week prior to that, had done it. It's rare to get the tight end consistency in the landscape that we're at. You take away obviously Evans, you take away obviously Godwin, probably more obviously Godwin than Evans, but you get where I'm going at. And I think there's a safety between him and Baker. And so K-Dot is one that you said earlier, Drew, you'd put him and Tucker Kraft. I actually would put Otten a few spots ahead of Tucker Kraft for the rest, at least going forward until we find out more. But that's just strictly because I trust Jordan Love to have 5 different options to go to, 4 different options in any given week. Fair. Whereas I think Tampa truly has 3, but it's closer than I'm making it sound. I like the matchup. I like the player. He might not be the most athletic in the world as far as tight ends go, but boy, he's got the trust and opportunity. And those 2 things in a tight end, wasteland will generate good value.
Also, if you want a little bit of DFS nugget tonight, K-Dot on DraftKings this week is 3,500. So sneaky value there for K-Dot on DraftKings this week as well if you're a DFS person.
Look at that.
Like it.
So our friend Jonathan Mateo says he has a running back situation with Breece Hall, Jordan Mason, Kareem Hunt, David Montgomery, wide receivers Higgins, Amari, Hopkins, Deontay Johnson, Dubs, and Kupp. Tight ends are Kelsey, Ferguson, and Otten. Do we try to trade Kelsey and Jordan Mason for Smith and Jonathan Taylor?
If you can do it, yeah, I'd do it in a heartbeat.
Absolutely. Yep. In a minute. Yeah.
Deontay Johnson would be another one that I would be fine with moving to at this point. If it's going to be Bryce Young, I just don't.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yep. But yeah, 100%. If you can do that trade, make it happen for sure.
And also,
Scano super chat. Let's go. Super chat. Let's go, Scano. Thank you, man.
All right.
Better be good. Don't you guys screw this one up. Let's go.
Yeah. we got to lock in, fellas. Come on.
PPR trade, Hunt for Devontae Smith. He got Cook, Hall, Kupp, and Shakir. In a 12-team, by the way.
Okay.
12-team league, Hunt for Devontae Smith, and he already has
Cook and Breece Hall. So he has Kupp and Shakir. All right. I'll lead off if you don't mind, since
go for it.
I would do it in a heartbeat. I would trade Kareem Hunt for Devonta Smith. I wouldn't find this too many situations, despite the fact that, of course, I'm a Chiefs fan and I love Kareem Hunt and what he's done. There, at some point, I do have a little worry about Tread, but I'm never starting him over, James Cook. I'm never going to start him over Breece Hall. And Khalil Shakir, to me, is volatile as volatile can get. And Devontae Smith is an excellent piece to have next to Cooper Kupp for the stretch.
Yeah, and what his next comment makes sense. Like, both running backs have a week 12 bye. Pacheco could be back. Hunt could be a lifesaver. But the thing for me is that it seems like receiver is more of a need for you than running back. And if you look at from counting this week, from week 8 to week 17, if you look at schedule adjusted fantasy points given up to the wide receiver position through the first 7 weeks, like based off of what we know, the Philadelphia Eagle receiver room has the second easiest strength of schedule from week 8 to week 17. So like Devonta Smith AJ Brown, both of those guys, they're set up to smash the rest of the way. And it's tough to know what the rest of the season holds for Kareem Hunt, but Devonta Smith has a role in that offense, and you have somewhat of a need for a wide receiver compared to running back. So I would make that move if I were you. And again, appreciate the super chat. Thank you, man.
Yeah. And so let's go ahead and get back into the Smash player because guys, question, and I'm concerned because it happened against my team, but the question we have to ask is now a valid one. Is Javonte Williams back?
Might be.
Could be. Because he finally showed some signs of life last week against the Saints, going 14 carries, 88 yards, and 2 touchdowns. I mean, yes, it is the Saints. Yes, it's not a great situation right now, but he showed some signs last week, and this week, it's not like it gets any worse for him because he's playing the Carolina Panthers defense, who, if we know anything about the Carolina Panthers this week, guys, and this year, it's a struggle right now, buddy. And so with the Panthers, this is from the Fantasy Points data suite. They are allowing 2.31 adjusted rushing yards before contact. At the data suite, that is basically a stat that measures the average yards per carry before contact that excludes sneaks, trick plays, and scrambles. So basically, pretty much traditional run plays. That is ninth worst. That is the ninth worst in the league. So they've been struggling at that in that mark. And over the past month with Javonte Williams, when he's had 10 or more carries, he's averaged at least 4.7 yards per carry in those games, and that's happened in 3 of the past 4 games. Also, in terms of opportunities, we were wondering at the beginning of the year, would this be a timeshare? Would Jaleel McLaughlin be a factor? Would Audric Estime be a factor? I think Sean Payton is starting to find his guy because Javonte Williams has had 17-plus opportunities in those 3 games where he's averaged at least 4.7 yards per carry. And the Carolina Panthers as well. Dead last against running backs and fantasy points allowed. And just getting into a little bit of game script and game talk, the Broncos are 10-point favorites in that game, so they should be probably expected to go ahead and lead and be comfortably ahead in that game. Therefore, when that happens and a team gets ahead, what are we doing? We're running the ball. We're keeping that clock moving. And so that puts Javonte Williams in a prime spot with a good workload and a good matchup. Ladies and gentlemen, we might be back. And as a bonus for you guys, the Carolina Panthers announced today that starting a quarterback on his revenge tour will be none other than Bryce Young.
What a brutal drop, man, that you lose the starting job and then your first game back is against Denver's defense. That's tough, man.
Now, the good news is this. If you have Javonte, you get this week to go back-to-back, and then you get the highest trade value he will ever have, and you dump him as quick as you can after this week against Carolina because, well, it's still Javonte Williams, and I will never be a believer, not even if there's a fire. I won't. I don't believe
Even if there's a fire.
Even if there's a fire.
Even
call
if
Dad.
Brothers full.
But look at his matchups. After Carolina, at Baltimore, at KC, Atlanta, Vegas, Cleveland, But, I mean, in those pivotal weeks where we're talking weeks 9, 10, 11, and going into week 12, you can't afford to get, 6 points from your RB2 position with Javonte. So I'm saying it. He's going to have a good week. I agree with you. Great smash play, and then smash that trade button and try to find anybody that likes him and wants to trade you for him. My 2 cents.
Kind of agree with that as well. So, in terms of our next trade question, who's next? Little pro wrestling reference for you. Logan Goldberg is saying that he's in an 8 team and he has Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, Devontae Adams, Walker, A-Chain, and Hunt.
Nice.
He got offered Kamara and Puka for Justin Jefferson. Should he take this for a long-term flex?
No. 8-team league, I want to have as many studs as possible. And if I do make a trade, I want to be on the side that's getting the 1 player. If you make a 2-for-1 deal, make sure you are the one that's on the side getting the 1 player and you're trading away the 2 players for the 1. In an 8-team league, just stack as many studs as you have, and you're already doing that. So I wouldn't make that move.
Yeah, I agree with that. So let's quickly get into these pass players and go ahead, Nate, go ahead and kick us off with your first pass for here in week 8.
Yeah, we've touched on a little bit about the lack of some of the playmakers on the team. Tony Pollard losing DeAndre Hopkins, which doesn't necessarily mean much. You think maybe they will just motivate to run the ball more, but running the ball against Detroit has proven damn near impossible. Yes, I know that Aaron Jones had a touchdown last week, so I think it was Detroit's second touchdown allowed all season, or maybe it was their first. But regardless, I don't trust any running back going forward with that. I think it sounds like Tajay Spears is trending in the right direction. If I'm wrong, please let me know, and I will correct that going in my expectation for Tony Pollard. But I still, even with that, I still don't think that I want any running back with an offense that looks as inept as Tennessee against the Detroit Lions defense. You can do better.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. I mean, and not to mention, the Tennessee Titans are just looking like they are just going all out on any competitiveness this year. I mean, they made a trade today where they traded away Ernest Jones, the fourth as well.
Yep.
Got Jerome Baker back in a pick. Tony Pollard maybe being batted around as a potential trade candidate as well. I mean, there's just a lot not going right with the Titans right now. So you have every right to go ahead and be out on that offense as well. But Drew, you and I are about to continue a theme we've started all season, which is kind of just loving to pick from the same games. So I'm going to go ahead and let you bat lead off on this and tell us why Marvin Harrison Jr. is not a good matchup against the Miami Dolphins.
Yeah, you say loving to pick the same games, but I actually fucking hate this right now because I was probably the highest of us three during the redraft season on Marvin Harrison Jr. So maybe me not wanting to put the blame on the rookie receiver is some take lock. But look, I did not expect the Cardinals to draft this guy at 4 overall and then try to turn him into their version of Alec Pierce. That was not on my bingo card at all. But Seth Walder, he shared some data on Twitter a couple days ago that showed which receivers were furthest downfield 3 seconds into running their route. And Marvin Harrison Jr. was 5th among all receivers in that category. He was among the who's who of the all cardio team next to guys like MVS and Jalen Hyatt. And for the life of me, I just can't understand why this is how the Cardinals are choosing to deploy him. Scott Barrett also had an incredible data pool using the Fantasy Points data suite average separation score, which showed that he has been the 5th best receiver whenever it comes to creating separation on comeback routes and crossing routes. And he's been the 6th best on post routes. Those 3 routes combined barely make up a higher percentage of his total routes compared to just go routes by themselves, where he has been the 5th worst at creating separation. I know that he's an incredible receiver prospect. I get that, but I don't understand why Arizona continues to make him go out there and fight for his life every week instead of just drawing up some easier targets for him. And as long as this usage continues, I don't know how we can be excited to start him in fantasy, and especially on a week like this. Like, he's playing the Dolphins. They've been the 3rd toughest matchup for fantasy receivers so far on the year. And so I'm not completely out on Marvin Harrison Jr. for the season. I think the talent will rise to the top. And I don't know how they continue to deploy him in this way the entire year. But with the injuries that we're dealing with, I doubt you can afford to set Marvin Harrison Jr. But once again, this week, I think you have to temper expectations.
Yeah, and I agree with that because Marvin Harrison Jr., we know the talent, but like you said, the usage just hasn't been there in the way that would be optimal for him. Like, it's a frustrating situation. And the same goes for my past player, which is Trey McBride, who first off is in a very tough matchup against the Miami Dolphins this week, who have the 2nd best pass defense against tight ends. And he's really been a boomer bust guy this year, as most tight ends have been. But for a guy who had the expectations of Trey McBride in the season he had last year, the fact that he's been only used in the red zone 4 times all year, he has 4 red zone targets on 45 total targets, has been a frustrating situation. All of his advanced stats say that he should be smashing, but if that's not happening, then we need to look in the mirror and figure out what is the root of that. And the root of that might just be the performance of Kyler Murray so far this season, guys. Mm-hmm. He hasn't been great in the pocket, and his fantasy value has been boosted by an unreal rushing floor. I mean, last week you look at him, he had 21.7 fantasy points. He was a quarterback 5 in the week, yet he only had 145 passing yards. What does that tell us about the usage of this offense right now? It tells us that Kyler Murray might be running for his life a little bit, and it tells us that this passing game is struggling to find what their identity is. They're trying to figure themselves out. And in terms of Trey McBride and the matchup that he has this week, I don't feel like this is the week where the rubber isn't quite going to meet the road just yet in terms of McBride.
It's fair. It's fair. I'm hoping this is like the last of a down week, and maybe you can use this as a buy low opportunity, because I was a big Trey McBride guy coming into the season. This certainly wasn't the year that I hoped, but yeah, I'm with you. I've got him lower than consensus in my rankings this week as well.
Yeah, so moving into that second smash player, Nate, I think we briefly touched on the revenge tour of Bryce Young. I think this probably has a strong reason as to why you're picking your pass player for the week in Deontay Johnson playing the Denver Broncos.
There you go. You hit everything I could have said. As if I'm gonna think of the glory days with Andy Dalton, those days are gone, unfortunately. And I never thought I'd say those words, but that's what I've said, and I just need to say no more.
The glory days of Andy Dalton are behind us.
Denver is still giving up the lowest amount of fantasy points above expectation to the wide receiver position through the first 7 weeks. The toughest matchup for fantasy receivers, and now you've got Bryce Young back. So, yeah, it's tough to feel good about Deontay this week.
Terrible. And Pat Surtain got a full practice in.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, he's back. That's right.
I was trying to keep it simple. We could just keep adding on why Deontay Johnson.
Yeah, it just keeps getting worse and worse.
The rich get richer. So, Drew, go ahead and give us your second pass for the week, my man.
Yeah, don't look now, but the Rams defense and the secondary specifically, they're starting to tighten it up a little bit. They're getting it together finally. Over the last 5 weeks, they've given up the 7th lowest average fantasy points above expectation to the receiver position. And now the sample size, that 5-week sample size does include their bye week. So, they got to pass for that week. It's technically a 4-week sample, but also included in that sample is matchups against the Bears and the Packers, who I think is pretty fair to say they have really solid wide receiver rooms and good quarterbacks throwing to those receivers. And despite that, there still have been, top 10 in terms, or I guess bottom 10 in terms of who you want your fantasy receivers to go up against. And look, I fully expect Justin Jefferson to get his, and the Rams have not been good at all over fantasy running backs over the last 5 weeks. So I think this could be another good week for Aaron Jones as well. But I think Jordan Addison is just going to be the odd man out here. I think he's the guy that if I can help it, I'm going to be fading him. Very similar to what I said about Marvin Harrison Jr. with the injuries that everybody's dealing with, you might not be able to afford to set him. But I would temper expectations this week. And if you do have to have him in your lineup, maybe look for spots elsewhere where you might need to insert some upside guys to try to make up for what I think will be a down week for Jordan Addison.
Yeah, all those things make sense. And speaking of things that don't make sense in my mind, getting to this third pass player for the week, Drew, I know that you're going to stand in unison with me on this and talk about how heartbreaking it is that I'm mentioning Anthony Richardson at the Houston Texans as our pass player for the week, because we just might have to ring the alarm that as of right now, and that could change, he still has a very young career, but Anthony Richardson, not very, very good at being a pocket quarterback right now, Bob. And Shane Steichen seems to want him to throw the ball downfield and be that pocket guy. You guys remember a little thing we mentioned a couple weeks ago about the Tim Tebow line?
Mm-hmm.
The vaunted Tim Tebow line, which is a 47.9 career completion percentage. Anthony Richardson, barely above the Tebow line so far this year, guys, at 48.5% for the year. Yikes.
Not great.
In his 4 complete starts this year, he's been 50% or under in completion percentage in all of those games. That being said, they seem to be committed to him getting thrown the ball down the field. He's been averaging 12 air yards per attempt so far this season. But he's also had 6 interceptions in those 3 full starts. He hasn't been that guy. It's been tough to watch. Mm-hmm. He hasn't been efficient. He hasn't been accurate. He's getting forced into a role he may not be comfortable with. I will say this is a silver lining. If Jonathan Taylor is back this week, we may see the Indianapolis Colts get back to a little bit more of what they're good at, which is using Richardson's legs, using Taylor in unison, and hopefully we can see a little more production out of Anthony Richardson. But based off of everything we've seen, and he is the 7th best running back in total quarterback in total rushing yards this year. I just can't put faith in Anthony Richardson right now, and I won't until further notice.
I'm going to push back on this one just a tad. And again, this is probably take lock because you know how much I love Anthony Richardson, but he has had success both this year and last year against Houston. They struggle a little bit against rushing quarterbacks. They also have been the 22nd worst matchup, so essentially the 10th best matchup for fantasy quarterbacks so far on the year. And in week 1, they played against Houston, and it was the infamous, I forget who it was, but that bomb touchdown pass that Richardson threw in week 1 that just broke the internet. I forget who caught it. It was probably Alec Pierce because it was Alec Pierce, yeah. But Anthony Richardson was the quarterback 4 in week 1 against Houston, and so like I get your argument. And it's extremely fair, and I get the concern with Richardson. But for this week specifically, where I have Richardson, he's in my lineup, and I'm not going to tell you I'm not nervous, but I do think that this could be a time where maybe like, hey, go, before Sunday morning hits, go throw some low ball offers on Richardson, because I don't want to go off the rails here, because for this week it's a very fair call, but like just rest of season speaking, I know there's some noise for Joe Flacco and shit like that, but what do the Colts have to gain by benching Richardson, who is their quarterback of the future supposedly, and starting Joe Flacco to maybe get like a 5 seed and crawl their way into the playoffs? And so I think a lot of Richardson owners are really down on him right now. So I think he could be another great buy low option for all the reasons that you mentioned, Red. And I think that it's fair concerns to have, but for me, I'm playing him this week. Not to say I'm not nervous about it, but yeah, I'm not quite ready to give up on him yet. And again, maybe that's just me clinging onto my priors way too hard.
Now, I will never want to give up on Anthony Richardson, but if you told me that, you don't have to tell me. I can read. I can see this. This is the schedule.
Passing's been brutal,
and the schedule doesn't help that. It's after Houston, he goes to Minnesota, then they welcome Buffalo. They go to New York against the Jets. Then they get Detroit. They go to New England. Then they're on a bye in week 14, then they go to Denver. And then they have Tennessee. And then week 17 and 18, which are probably useless. 17 might not be. That's at the Giants, which could be fine, but it hasn't been. The Giants have been really aggressive. But that schedule is nasty. Like,
the Colts have the second. The Colts, the quarterback position for the Colts has the second toughest strength of schedule for the rest of the year. You're spot on, man. And Houston's a good matchup. Minnesota in week 9 is a good matchup, and after that, there's literally not another plus matchup until week 17 against the Giants. So that's a great point. I haven't
Minnesota's
looked into
matchup.
That's a great point.
Just with the blitz scheme, I just worry about his. I mean, that could be a good or bad thing. And we can go on a different tangent, different time. I don't want to, run too long, but
I'm so glad we all get along. This is past though, because this is a good conversation to have, and it's fair to be worried even this week and rest of season. I hadn't looked into that enough, and that's his strength of schedule rest of the year is rough, man.
All right, let's quickly hit this trade question, then quickly hit our smash players and stash players, and get on out of here. Jay Smalls asked if he should trade Devontae Adams and Rashad White for Devon Achane.
Man, I don't know. I really don't, because I love the upside of Achane, and I feel like Adams, while I do believe there will be better days ahead than what we had seen all year, I don't know if the separation between Rashad White, despite I don't think the Sean Tucker hype is as warranted anymore. I think it's not a hot hand approach as much as it's still Rashad White and Bucky Irving, those two. And I don't know if I would give up him and Devontae Adams for Achane, as much as I love Achane. Drew?
Yeah, I think that's really fair. I'm really high on Achane rest of the season. And I think you can talk yourself into making the deal if you believe that Adams will be the 2 behind Wilson. But if you think, if you're in the camp that, hey, the the Devontae Adams, Aaron Rodgers thing. Like that's gonna be their wide receiver one. I don't think that you can. I don't think that you can make that deal, but I like Achane a lot rest of the season. I think that he is one of the best buy low opportunities right now, but I don't know if that's necessarily buying low.
Yeah, I
And
would agree.
Yeah, and speaking of guys that we can go ahead and talk about getting low and getting on the low right now, stash being players under 50% ownership in sleeper leagues. Nate, quickly go ahead and give us your stash player currently.
I think pay attention right now if the smoke there's fire type talk on the Cooper Cup trade scenario. I don't know if he really will go anywhere, but I do believe that there's been enough conversation that it makes sense. If he goes, even if he doesn't, Tutu Atwell, 26% roster right now, would immediately inherit a pretty decent workload, especially, you know, if the offense can stay together with Matthew Stafford. So at only 26%, he's on my bench right now, even with Cooper Cup there.
Yep. I think him and Whittington both are worth stashing just to see what happens.
Yep. Drew?
So things are finally starting to happen for Troy Franklin. He's played over 50% of the snaps the last 2 weeks, and Courtland Sutton he's the only person that's ran a higher percentage of routes. And during that same 2-week span, Franklin's led all Broncos pass catchers in target share, receptions, and he's second on the team in receiving yards and receiving yards per game and yards per route run. I mean, the reality is he's still catching passes from Bo Nix. So he's barely been a top 35 receiver over the last 2 weeks. So I'm not saying like pick him up and go start him, but he's only being rostered in 12% of leagues after waivers ran today, and he's still sitting out there in a lot of leagues. And I think he's worth a stash just in case. We see it all the time with rookie receivers starting to kind of, you know, build momentum the second half of their rookie years. And so I think it's worth at least putting him on your bench now to see if you have a decent flex play sooner rather than later.
Yeah, and for me, I'm just going to go ahead and say it. Juwan Jennings. Brandon Ayuk goes down with a torn ACL last week. We saw earlier this season and a few times this season where Juwan Jennings has been an absolute difference maker. He had a 3 for 88 game against the Patriots with the 45-yard reception. He had that monster game against the Rams where he had 11 catches for 175 yards and 3 scores. Season opener against the Jets, he had 5 for 64, 12.8 average. Now, it has tapered off the past couple weeks, but I think that might have been due to the fact that they were trying to get Brandon Ayuk a little more involved in the offense. Now that Brandon Ayuk is out for the season, we know that San Francisco 49ers, we kind of all saw Ricky Pearsall as a 1-for-1 Deebo Samuel replacement. So in that situation, I have to think that if they need an Ayuk replacement, I think they might go with a guy who has more experience in the system, more experience in this offense. And currently, Juwan Jennings only owned in 39% of sleeper rosters as of this morning, October 23rd. So I'm on a Juwan Jennings train right now. Are either of you preferring Ricky Pearsall?
I give him a slight nod just because of what I just talked about with Troy Franklin, that rookie receivers, especially like a guy that they invested a first-round pick in this offseason, I think they're going to give him the chance to try to take the role. But Juwan Jennings is obviously already flashed, and he has the connection with Brock Purdy. So I don't blame anybody that wants to prioritize Jennings over Pearsall. But where I had the chance to pick up both, I took my shot on Pearsall personally.
Gotcha. One last question, if you get this one, because I'm intrigued because he was almost my pickup. Go right ahead.
Yeah, so he joined late and he paused if he missed it. What are our thoughts on Sterling Shepard? Is he going to get targets, or do we prefer Cedric Tillman or Troy Franklin?
So, I mean, the easy waiver scenario in Tampa had been Jalen McMillan, because that does make a lot of sense. And Jalen McMillan is probably better off being utilized across the field in different areas. What we've seen, though, is that Sterling Shepard can play that slot role, which is the most advantageous on that Tampa offense when Chris Godwin's out. Sterling Shepard, this specific week, if he were to step in that role, the matchup is fantastic. I mean, you're already going up against the 5th highest or 5th most targeted slot team in the NFL. All signs point towards a good floor game for whomever that may be. The question is, I just don't know 100% if it's going to be McMillan or if it will be Sterling Shepard. We saw McMillan's highest slot percentage this week since week 1, but Shepard is probably the better, basic immediate, like 1 week play at the slot, with Jalen McMillan being the better long-term play. So I like Sterling Shepard. I think I'd probably still take Tillman or Franklin over him rest of season, but intriguing 1 week play.
Yeah,
yeah, he is intriguing. But I mean, Cedric Tillman, he stepped in immediately, and he
12.
led the Browns and first read target share. He was the priority. I mean, it was him and Njoku. Those were the two guys that were immediate benefactors of the Amari Cooper departure. So, yeah, I think of those guys, I think I prefer Tillman, and then Shepard, and then Franklin if we're prioritizing the three.
Yeah. So, guys,
we got one more.
Let's get to it.
One more.
So he has to choose 2 wide receivers, 1 tight end, or wide receiver. His options are Drake London, Darnell Mooney, Jordan Addison, Trey McBride. He also has Puka and Nico on IR. Do you think they are good enough to make me win? Also, folks, we appreciate this. Subscribe and like. We appreciate it, Turgley. Yeah, good stuff.
Appreciate you, Turgley. Thank you.
Okay.
So, 2 receivers, 1 tight end.
I'll take Drake London.
Yeah.
Drew, your turn.
Yeah. That's the no-brainer, right? The tough thing is, honestly, is like truly, I think the 2 best options, they play on the same team, and so that's tough. Like, you don't want to start. You're not going to feel good starting Drake London and Darnell Mooney. Like, you don't want to start the top 2 receivers for the same team necessarily. But I think that those are probably the 2 best options this week. But you want to bank on London having a big week, and for that to happen, Mooney needs to have so much of a down week. So you probably want to fade Mooney for this particular scenario. McBride has Miami, who has been really tough against fantasy tight ends to start the year. I talked about Addison as a guy that I'm fading, but I think that in this specific scenario, I think I'm doing London, Addison, and McBride, and I'm setting Mooney.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. Is that based off of everything you just said? So, yeah, guys, that's the show tonight. Rob Thomas, the real Rob Thomas of Matchbox 20 and Fantasy Football fame.
Thomas, please stand up.
Yeah, we love it. So, for everybody that's been watching us tonight, we appreciate your time. Don't forget to like, subscribe, check out fantasyandframes.com, and don't forget to check out right behind us right now. Shoot the Gap, ladies and gentlemen. For my boy Drew Scott at Drew3MR, for my boy Nate Markham at Nate Markham, I am Rhett Manuel at R Manuel Sports. Toodles.
This should be played at high volume, preferably in a residential area.